Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our TOPdesk webinar on problem management, an introduction to the problem management process and how you can take away and apply it at your organisation. Now, you might be excited to know that this is actually going to be recorded for YouTube, but if you are listening live, a little tip for you, you will notice a GoToWebinar panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Make sure that's collapsed throughout the webinar so you've got the best possible view of the presentation being given. But don't forget, if you want to ask a question at any time, which we really encourage, you need to expand that screen again and type your question in the question box, and my colleagues here will be able to answer it for you. We also have a dedicated question section at the end of this webinar, so please don't hesitate to ask anything that you feel. So, problem management. You might not know this, but TOPdesk actually has its own problem management module. And although we will have a few sneak peeks of the module in this webinar, the general theme on this webinar will be tailored towards problem management, regardless of what tool you use, whether it's TOPdesk or whether you have the module or not. Just to start off, a quick introduction to myself. My name is Hannah. I'm a service management consultant for TOPdesk, so part of my job is to go around and help organisations implement TOPdesk and help them improve their service management processes. And when I heard that we were doing a webinar on problem management, I essentially jumped at the chance to help deliver this webinar because I feel very passionately about problem management. One, because the module itself in TOPdesk it's a small but really powerful module that gives a huge amount of benefit. And the process too, I find when organisations are taking problem management seriously, they see the benefits so quickly. The problem is, a lot of organisations aren't always spending a lot of time on problem management. They're almost avoiding it, and it's usually because they're quite busy firefighting, or it's not a priority for them at the moment, or perhaps it's not actually part of their culture as an organisation to look into problem management. So hopefully we'll tackle some of these issues today so that you come away also a big enthusiast for problem management. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to start off by defining what a problem is. What do we mean when we say problem management, which can be quite a generic term? We're then going to look into the process of problem management and the best practices that we recommend. This will, of course, as I've mentioned, dip into the TOPdesk tool slightly to give you a few hints and tasters of what you can do with TOPdesk, but we'll also look at its wider application, and this will feed on nicely into our final section, which is introducing the problem management culture into your business so it really feels like a natural way of working for all of your operators and analysts. So let's get started with defining problem management. What do we mean when we say this? What does this generic term actually mean in terms of service management? Well, I couldn't really think of a better way to define problem management than the ITIL definition. It was very good. And for those listening who aren't familiar with ITIL, ITIL is a best practice framework for service management used heavily by IT, but there are elements as well that are useful to other service management, such as facilities and HR. And ITIL basically says that a problem is the underlying cause of one or more incidents. Sounds pretty simple. And actually, when you look at a problem, most of the time, you won't know the cause at the time that you're logging that problem in the first place. You'll know, hey, we've got a problem, but we don't actually know what the cause is. So where problem management comes in is it allows you to investigate so that you can hopefully stop, eliminate, or reduce the impact of these incidents. So a pretty perfect description. Let's put this into a bigger picture though, so that we can see where problem management fits into other areas of service management. So the diagram here is very top level, shows some of the processes that you might use within service management. Starting off with an incident, I thought I'd use the classic example that you probably have all heard of, the incident of getting a flat tire. Oh no, what do? You can't drive your car, your service is disrupted, so naturally you go and put your spare tire on and drive off. At that point, you have resolved the incident, but there is still a kind of deeper problem here, which might be, for example, you have a bold patch on your tyre, which has caused you to get that incident in the first place. So here we can see here the cause of the incident is in fact the problem. From here, you might go and raise a change, which will probably be taking your car to the mechanic, have them put in a new wheel or a new tyre for you, and finally, or update your asset management database with your service record. So that's what a problem is. That's where it fits into the big picture. But there is one very common pitfall that we find people can find a bit confusing with problem management. And that's because it's very easy to mistake problems and major incidents. Now, a major incident for example, could be something like, oh, we've had the whole Wi-Fi drop for our site in Swindon. This is a huge problem, and people start using the terminology problem and think there's a big problem going on, whereas actually this is a major incident, because a major incident is anything where you have a significant incident or a significant number of incidents. And it could be significant for, it has a very high impact. So for example, in that example of the Wi-Fi dropping, a whole site was impacted. It could be because there is high urgency. It could be because there is a response demanded that is above and beyond that needed of your routine everyday incident management. Whatever it is, that is still an incident. And an easy way, or a kind of good phrase to help you remember the difference between an incident and a problem, is to think that incidents are the symptoms of problems. Think about when you go to the doctor with your symptoms. Think of these as like incidents. So you might say, you might go with mild symptoms, such as you have a headache, or you have maybe some pain in a joint in your knee. You might go with a major symptom or major incident, such as a cardiac arrest. A good doctor will use all their skills to find the cause of those incidents, which is the problem. So why have you had the headaches? Why have you experienced this heart attack? And that's what problem management is. It's about getting to that root cause. So now we know the definition of what a problem is. Let's have a deeper look into the process of problem management. Now, you might be listening today for a number of reasons, but if you are listening because your organization already uses a problem management process, or they're looking to implement a problem management process, you're in a really good position, because it's a very advanced step in your evolution to service excellence. Why? Because it's very easy at a basic level for a service to be reactive. We can all be reactive in our day-to-day. A highly evolved, mature organization is more proactive, and that is what problem management is all about. So, to help you make that next step in your evolution with confidence, we recommend some of these best practices to ensure that your problem management process will be a success. The first one is that you should always have a separate place to log your problems. Problems should have a dedicated time, resource, and space, so that you don't merge the grey area between incidents and problems, and you're dedicating the resource that you need to your problem management investigation. We also recommend that the problem management process should be something that involves all of your operators and analysts. Everyone who has a stake, if you like, in the process should be able to contribute. Now, some people sometimes like to shy away from that. They think that actually a lot of the problem management process should be conducted by a problem manager. Now, we do agree you definitely do need a problem manager. Those two roles are very important. And a little bit later, when we're looking at cultural change, we'll come back to these and see how you can define roles and responsibilities for these two areas. But if you start with these as your bedrock, you'll be in a great position to implement the process. So let's start and look in the process in a little more detail. Every single problem will start off initially by being detected, and it could come in a number of different ways. It could be detected by a system monitoring tool. It could be detected by the problem manager noticing a trend. It could be detected by your guys on the ground spotting something and thinking, hey, I've seen this before. This seems to happen a lot. I think we might have a problem here. However you detect it, the first thing that you will need to do is log, categorize, and prioritize that problem straight away so you have a good record of it. Once that is done, you can begin your investigation and diagnosis. And this is where your years of watching CSI will finally pay off, because you're going to employ all of these skills that you've learned to really investigate, get to the whodunit, essentially, of the problem. So you'll look at things like trend analysis, recurrence of incidents, linked assets, knowledge items, reporting, ongoing projects, changes, anything that you think could have caused this issue that you're seeing. Why are you doing this? Essentially, you're trying to find two things. You're trying to find the root cause, the underlying deep reason why this thing happened, and you're also trying to find a workaround, something that your operators can use to restore the service to your customers. When, and only when you have those two things, are you able to close off your problem. And we actually recommend a two-tiered closure for problems, just because of the nature of the work you do with problems. You invest a lot of time and resource. So use two tiers, such as completed and closed, to make sure that you really tested to a thorough degree that the root cause is true and that your workaround is going to be successful, and the problem manager is happy with the work that's been done. Let's take a quick look actually at a problem record in TOPdesk TOPdesk, just to give you an idea of what it looks like. I've taken a screenshot of a problem in TOPdesk, and you can see if you do use our incident management module, they do look quite similar. There's a space for you to categorize, prioritize, and work on this type of card. So you don't need to learn a whole new thing if you are looking into implementing this module. There are, however, two crucial things that I wanted to draw your attention to on the card, and these are two tabs of very important use. One of them is the links tab. Now, this is where you, as your own detective with your CSI hat on, are gathering all of your evidence, all of your things that you might think might be linked in some way to the scene of the crime, if you will. There's also a partial problems tab, and this is where you can assign investigation to other members of your team, which is really useful if you've got talents and expertise in certain areas. So you can really kind of distribute the resource to make sure people's talents are used to find the root cause. So once you've used these, used your tool and used all the powers in your head, you're now able to close your problem as long as you have your root cause and your workaround. Upon closure, you now have something which is known as a known error, and your known error record should also be separate from the problem. You might be wondering why can't this all be one and the same thing? And the important reason is that when you create a known error record, it gives you the opportunity to recategorize the information that you have if needed. Remember that the category that you chose right at the start might not actually be the category that it ends up being at the end, because through your investigation and diagnosis, you've discovered things that made you recategorize and potentially reprioritize what you have done. If you are happy with your known error and you feel like it's been filled in correctly, it can then become part of your known error database. Now, this should be a library of known errors that all of your operators can draw on, which is really useful for their dealings with customers. So if a customer from Swindon has called up about the Wi-Fi dropping on their particular site, you can say, oh yes, we know about this, it's a known error, I'm really sorry that this happens, but actually we know what causes it and we have a great workaround for you to use so you can get back to work. So known error database really is the kind of the golden standard you're aiming for at the end of this, that all of your operators can draw on. But we don't want known errors to sit in the known error database forever. You might think, oh, I've done lots of hard work here, I've done my investigation, I've got my root cause, my workaround, I can just sit back now. No, eventually we do want you to be able to close your known errors, which leads on to another very common question that we hear a lot when we're implementing problem management, and that is, when do you close a known error? When should that happen? Well, the answer to that is you only close a known error when the issue no longer occurs. Now, the best way to think about this is to go back to our story of going to the doctor, and you've gone with your symptoms, say it was your dodgy knee, for example, and the doctor knows what the root cause is, knows what the problem is, but he gives you a workaround, which is taking pain medication to make you feel better. So you can still get on with your day-to-day life. However, the problem still exists. You still have a dodgy knee. It might be the case that actually the only way to fix that is to have an operation, which in terms of service management is a bit more like raising a change. It's a bit more of a permanent, larger thing that you would do to stop that problem from occurring again. So that actually feeds quite nicely into that life cycle that we saw at the very start, that you have an incident that could lead to a problem, but a lot of the time you'll only really eliminate your problem completely when you raise a change that kind of removes the thing that was causing that issue in the first place. Now, it can be tempting to leave your known errors just sitting there because, you know, we've got a great workaround in place and that kind of does the job, but we do encourage you to really raise changes to resolve them wherever possible, simply because you wouldn't do that for yourself as an individual. You wouldn't carry on taking pain medication if there was the option to sort it for good. Again, with known errors, we recommend 2 tiers of closure, completion and closure. This is so that you can do things such as testing and acceptance to make sure that the change that you've raised actually does work and the issue is resolved. And that way you're really confirming your resolution and you haven't spent all this time and research doing something to find out that the Wi-Fi still drops in the Swindon site. So really, really useful to have those 2 tiers there. And that is the problem management process in a nutshell. It's quite simple. As you can see, there's nothing, you know, too overwhelming here in terms of what you can expect. But next, let's move on to something that can be a little bit trickier than understanding the process itself. And that's how you can actually introduce this process and introduce a culture of problem management within your organization. We've mentioned already, it's not always a priority for organizations to look at problem management. They're quite busy being reactive and just looking at what is in front of them. So what can we do to get people on board? How can we integrate problem management as a natural way of working? Well, one key way is to appoint clear roles and responsibilities so people know where they stand and know what they're doing with this new process. The first crucial role, and you've probably already guessed it, is the problem manager. Now, this person's going to be very busy because they're going to be in charge of the process. They're going to be in charge of configuring whatever tool that you use. They're going to be monitoring the process. They're going to be coordinating problem management with other processes, so it feeding into incident and asset management, for example. They're going to be in charge of training. They're going to be maintaining the known error database. There's a lot this person does, which is why we also believe that you should involve everybody as a responsible person within problem management. Now, this also is very helpful because true cultural change only really happens when as many people as possible feel like they're adding value, or they're giving something or getting something back from this new way of working. So having everyone involved will embed this in a natural way of working. It can, agreed, be easy sometimes to shy away and say, oh, I'm not sure I want to enable all of my operators to be able to kind of do these analysis techniques, do all of these quite in-depth studying that problem management requires. We're not saying everyone would have the same level, but there is something that you can give, a responsibility that everyone should be capable of to do their own investigation into problem management. And TOPdesk actually has built a special piece of functionality that even if you don't have this module, you might be able to replicate in some way, and it's called the Problem Wizard. Now, the Problem Wizard is a preliminary step before committing to logging a full problem. So before you say, right, we've got a problem here, we're going to spend time and we're going to spend money trying to figure out what's going on, it's kind of like before you get to that stage of commitment. I've got a little screenshot of it on the right-hand side so you can see what it looks like in the TOPdesk tool, but you might be wondering, what did it do? What do I use it for? Well, it's a place to gather information, all operators, for them to think to themselves, hey, I've got a little bit of a hunch here. I'm going to gather some evidence together to see if my hunch is correct. So they can do things such as linking incidents and assets to this kind of bucket, if you like, of evidence. They can also make their notes, so they can write down things that they've been wondering or trends that they think they've spotted, because these are the people on the ground, don't forget. A lot of the time, the people interacting with the services will be the first person to notice a reoccurring problem. And once they think they're in a good stage, they've gathered their evidence and they've made some good observations, they can submit it for review and possible problem creation, which is where the problem manager might come in. They might say, oh, I've done my weekly review of the problem wizards, and actually there's two really interesting points here. And we have noticed this make of broiler breaks down more, or we have noticed that the Wi-Fi drops here. And that is when you decide, right, we're going to commit time to investigate this. And once you've got your problem wizard set up, that is, from a TOPdesk point of view, all of the functionality in a nutshell. And so those of you who do have the module will probably be familiar with this screenshot, which goes through all of the steps that we've gone through together in a concise manner. Now, if you ever are wondering more about this process, or you have the module and you're not sure how to set it up, or you're interested in the module, please don't hesitate to get in touch with TOPdesk. Myself or another consultant would be more than happy to help you set this up exactly as you see it here on the screen. But when it comes again to our original point of introducing the culture change, there are some really nice quick wins that you can do to embed it within your organization. And one tip that we encourage is to make accessing problem management as easy as you possibly can from the tool that you use. So adding shortcuts so that literally the number of clicks for an operator to get where they need to be is absolutely minimal. One of the most important shortcuts that you should include is a shortcut to the known error database, because we mentioned it was that kind of golden thing that you're aiming for, that library of all of your known errors. It should be so easy for your operators to see that library. So then when they are speaking to a customer, they can say, yeah, no, we've heard about that. We know what's causing it. Here's your workaround. We've tested this workaround. You should be able to work normally, at least in the interim. So any sort of quick clicks or quick wins like that can help your operators will embed it even deeper. And of course, no culture change would be complete without training and coaching. And there are some kind of obvious things that you would think to train in, for example, raising awareness of problem management, training them in the tool itself, so where to click and how to work their way through the fields. But sometimes we don't think about actually training your operators or your analysts in the process, a bit like what we've talked about today. Make them aware of the big picture, make them aware of how problem management fits into their everyday life, because what that means is they'll start to see the benefit of it. They'll start to see, hey, hang on, this is actually helping me in some way, which means they'll be much more likely to get on board and to take ownership of the process and want to use it. Another training area that sometimes people don't think operators would be interested in, but are hugely popular within problem management, is training in the different analysis techniques. And here I'm talking about the analysis that you use for certain operators who you want to enable to be that detective, to be that CSI, so to speak, to really try and find out what the issue is. I had a quick look on the ITIL website, and there is a huge number of different problem analysis techniques that you could choose from, and I'm sure there's even more out there in the wider world. Some of these on the screen you'll probably recognize, Kepler-Trago, Pareto analysis. There's loads that you could invest training in for your operators. I've just picked one to do a picture of on the screen there, the 5 Whys. It's one of my favorites, only because it's so incredibly simple. Essentially, you just ask the question why 5 times, and each time you answer, you provide a more detailed, more in-depth answer to that question. So by the time you get to the 5th why, you've really hit the nail on the head of what the issue is here. It's so simple, and yet doing exercises and practicing that will make your operators better at analysing problems. Now, we've all seen projects fail because they fizzled out, and this often isn't because they've lacked the training at the start. Like, training such as this is really important, especially at the start. But even more important than this training is the coaching that you need to do to keep the momentum going. Coaching is, for TOPdesk, it's the key success factor if you're going to really embed a culture change and keep that momentum going. We intend for everyone who uses a problem management process to continue training and educating, continue supporting, put systems of support in place, and coaches that keep your operators motivated with problem management, so it actually becomes second nature, and it isn't just some big push that we do at the start of the year and within 6 months everyone's forgotten about it. So keep introducing new things and improving the processes as you go along. Coaching really is crucial there if you do want it to be a change for good. So let's just say that you have done all this hard work, you've trained up your operators, you've configured your perfect tool, everything has got your shortcuts exactly where you want it. What benefits can you now expect from all this hard work that you've put in? Well, the benefits list is pretty long, and I wanted to kind of finish on this as a real high point of how great problem management is for such a kind of small, nifty process. The benefits are huge. One of the first benefits are pretty what we're expecting, to be honest. You can stop incidents occurring and reoccurring, and that in itself is a fantastic reason to look into problem management. It's not always going to be the case that you can stop incidents occurring at the start. It might be that the only way to resolve that problem is something that's going to happen a few years down the line. So what you can also do through problem management in that situation is expect benefits of minimizing the impact of those incidents. Even if you can't stop them completely, you can at least reduce the impact and reduce the volume of those that you're getting in. You can also expect to get increased customer satisfaction. Your customers, of course, going to be happier if you're getting less incidents and not having to log about the same things. You'll also find that you're saving a little bit of money. One, you'll be saving money because all of your workarounds will be tried and tested, and you're not ineffectively trying different things with different operators. You're also going to be spending less resource on those repetitive incidents. Your service desk aren't doing the same thing over and over again, trying to find out where something's happened. They have their known arrow database to draw on, so they can, give good, consistent answers and workarounds to your customers, which will, of course, save you money. You will, as a department, be much more reactive. This will make you more productive. It will give people more time to focus on projects that they're more interested in, rather than reactive work. And finally, it means that your service uptime will be much higher and your availability will be better as a natural result of having less incidents. And I think you'll agree that these benefits really are worth it, and it really is a true sign of a mature, evolved service management structure. And on that final note, before we do wrap up the webinar, I wanted to leave you with just some top tips to take away. So if you really are thinking, thinking seriously about problem management, just think about these few things that you can take back to your business. One of them is to communicate the speedy rewards and speedy benefits that you can get from this process. Don't just go in and say, right, we're going to do this thing because it's cool. go in and say, right, it's so amazingly fast that we can reap the benefits from this, and it's really, really going to be useful for us moving forward to reduce our incidents, really communicate those rewards to them to get people on board. Know your problem management definitions as well. Be clear in exactly what it is you're trying to implement and how this is different from incident management, which can be a bit confusing sometimes. It's the first time people are looking into it. Also, have a separate process for problem management that doesn't merge into incident management and follows the guidelines that we've talked about in this webinar. A few of my particular favorite guidelines are inclusive of everyone. Make sure everyone within your service management sector has a role to play in problem management. Ensure that you have a great known error database that everyone is checking and knows that they can draw on any time, and be sure to do coaching, even if it means spending less time and resource on training but more on coaching. I'd always recommend to do that to keep that momentum going and really bring in that natural way of working with problem management. And that's about all that we have got time for today. And don't forget, if you require any help or any assistance about anything that we talked about today within problem management, whether it's setting it up or whether it's just a question about the process, don't forget that we here at TOPdesk are more than happy to help, either through consultancy or getting in touch with you. In the meantime, it looks like we've had a few questions through from our listeners. So if you bear with me 1 minute, I'm just going to have a read through and see what people are asking. Okay, we've had a great question here from somebody who obviously uses the incident management module quite well, because they are asking what is the difference between known errors and standard solutions. Now, for those of you who don't know, standard solutions are part of the incident management module, and it's a way that you can apply a kind of quick fix or a quick call onto your incident to fill in lots of fields. So, fill in priority automatically, for example, because it's going to be the same every time. Classic example is a password reset. So what's the difference between this and a known error? And I guess in some ways there can be a bit of crossover. The point of a standard solution is that it can drive process. So it can change statuses, it can change priority, and it can allow you to close off an incident very, very quickly by following the same structured way of working. So for a password reset, for example, we follow these steps every single time, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's all pre-written out, and then you can close off the call straight away. The difference with a known error is that it's not necessarily going to be the solution to the call, if you like. It's not going to necessarily have be changing the fields on the call itself. It's literally, it's a bit like a library, if you like, where your operators can browse to look up a workaround and to look up to see if this is something that the organization is aware of as an error, and to see if it's been looked into. You may decide that actually for your most common known errors that you might put some as standard solutions, so you can apply them very quickly. But we do want to remember that standard solutions are something permanent. Standard solutions is a way of saying we always follow this process in the same way to do password resets, whereas known errors we hope will be very impermanent. So we know this is an error, but actually it's going to come in and be fixed in a couple of weeks. So it's more like a temporary way that you can look up to help your customers, rather than a permanent process that we always follow for quick calls. So I hope that has answered your question. We have another question here as well. Bear with me 1 moment. Okay, a very good question as well here from someone who's asking, in TOPdesk, how do you propose that we advertise when an active problem or known error has been raised for operators? And that is a really good question, because I think in a perfect world, I'd love to think that operators would be so used to using the known error database that they're proactively checking it when calls come in, or maybe looking at in the start of the week. But perhaps in reality, it's not going to be as nice as that if your operators aren't always working within TOPdesk. So what can you do? There's a couple of different ways that you can do this. You can either introduce it as part of your regular meetings with your staff. So I know some organizations who have stand-up meetings at the start of the week, for example, would have a section to literally quick fire the new known errors that have come in this week, or anything that anyone's been made aware of during the past few days that people might have missed. Another way that you can do this, which is slightly less kind of interactive, is to actually have email triggers based on the problems and known errors that you make in TOPdesk, so that as soon as a known error is created, or a problem even, you could start right from the beginning, that could notify multiple operators or team leads, for example, so then they can go and communicate it to to their colleagues as well. So you've got a number of different options, whether you go for the email route, whether you go for the kind of direct one-to-one communication, but we do encourage proactivity with the known error database as well, if that's possible. And let me just check, see if we have any more questions. I think that's absolutely everything for now. If I have missed your question for whatever reason, I am going to look through the webinar data now, and if I will get back to you on email. So even if we close off the webinar and you think of something, please do write it down and we will get back to you. But in the meantime, I want to say thank you very much for listening. You've been a wonderful audience, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinars.